So the first real signs of trouble in Bakhmut that I can recall is when it first started to get cold and rainy back in November. Ukraine still had control of the surrounding areas of Bakhmut at the time. We started to catch wind of the so-called death trenches. The situation was described as freezing cold trenches filled with corpses and water, so many losses they don't even count. Up till this time, we hadn't heard of any reports of losses in the region. The Russian MOD did not include the area in its daily report estimates. We started to hear that Ukraine was experiencing 250 casualties per day and even reached over 500 per day for a short stretch. Eventually, Ukraine was pushed back into the city. This opened up the opportunity for Russia to bring in their heavy artillery closer. Eventually, the town was surrounded by artillery and rockets. Once Russia took out Ukraine's air defense systems in the region, we then learned that Wagner actually operated their own aircraft. We started hearing of frequent air raids on the Ukrainian positions. The dismal news started to bleed out into the mainstream, and there were some calling for a retreat at that point. Well, Zelensky just doubled down and just thanked his men for being brave and hanging in there. He began to bring in what seemed to be an endless stream of reinforcements. We heard that Russia was not trying to capture the town at this point. They were fully happy to keep the situation in its current state of attrition. It started to be called the Bakhmut Black Hole, or by most, the meat grinder. Wagner had entered the city, but really made little progress as Ukraine would just bring in more and more men, and sometimes even tanks, to hold and even push the lines back to their original positions. Eventually, Wagner began their encirclement of Bakhmut as they needed to take advantage of this window where Ukraine is short of heavy weapons and armor. The real breakout in the area was fueled by a new strategy used by Russia in Yoklivka. They started to fan out in 3 or more directions and have repeated this strategy successfully ever since. The pressure on Bakhmut really started to be felt after the fall of Soledar. It seems that capturing that underground stronghold is going to be the key that unlocked the fall of Bakhmut. Shortly after Soledar fell, we had the fall of Klishivka to the south. So the group that captured Soledar is on the move to the north and has continually racked up new small settlements. The same can be said about the group that captured Klishivka in the south. Some reports claim they have just cut off the last main road into Bakhmut. Wagner PMC units attack enemy defensive lines and engage in fierce fighting near Stupki Station in Bakhmut. We've heard that Ukraine has started the evacuation of its best troops, including its foreign mercenaries. It's left behind its less experienced men to try to buy some extra time. According to some reports, the battle-hardened soldiers have been relocated to the west outskirts of the town to try to hold off an advance. Krasna Hora, which has been a bit of a seesaw battle so far, is now in a cauldron, and we hear that its fall is due at any moment. Since the encirclement and fall became undeniable, all we are hearing out of the West is more and more extreme escalation. It seems that the UK and various EU leaders are calling for direct conflict with Russia at this point.